You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Painted faces, masks of stone. A hollow laugh that chills the bone. Puppets dangle strings unseen. Life's a trick, a cruel machine. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Or just believe it?
For almost all of human history, our ancestors lived in motion, following herds, following seasons, water, and, of course, life itself. Then, somewhere around 12,000 years ago, everything shifted. A new way of living emerged, and not because it was better for our bodies, and not because it made us happier, but because it created something else entirely. Structures of control, surplus, hierarchy. We're talking about the first corporate system. This is breaking the system, and today we ask, which was better for humanity, farming or the nomadic life? And, of course, we always have to ask questions, and the question is, what did that choice cost us as humans? Okay. So let's go back. For nearly 300,000 years since Homo sapiens first emerged, humans lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers. We lived in small groups, seasonal movement, direct connection to nature, right? And we survived by knowing what to eat, when resources were abundant, how to avoid danger, and where to find water in drought. And there's probably not too many of us today that could do half of those things. So archaeological evidence supports this world. We look at the paleo diet and the remains of that. We look at sites like Ohalo II in present-day Israel, which dates back about 23,000 years ago. And that showed a variety of diets of things like fruits, nuts, fish, plants. And the thing that it did not include was grains, right? And that piece of information comes from Scientific American. And so the energy and health, we look at skeletons from early foragers. And that shows strong bones and low incidence of degenerative disease. So nomads weren't starving by any means. They often worked less than we do today. And some scholars estimate that they only worked about 15 to 25 hours per week, and most of that was to gather food. And their social structures, egalitarian, fluid, adaptive, reflected a world with no permanent property and no surplus to hoard. This was humanity in motion. It was balanced, it was responsive, it was sustainable, but in a fragile way and in a different way. One thing that it could not do was support large populations. Okay. And from about 10,000 to about 8,000 BC, we start seeing this rise in populations. Climate instability, compressed resources. So around 12,000 years ago, in multiple regions across the world, and especially in what they call the Fertile Crescent, humans began to do a couple different things. One was they started to domesticate animals, and they started to domesticate plants. And this transition is called the Neolithic Revolution, and that is a systematic shift from movement to settlement. And instead of hunting and gathering wild foods, people began farming. Well, what did we farm? Wheat and barley in the Near East. Of course, rice in East Asia. And maize, which is corn, in the Americas. And these weren't small tweaks by any means. They were fundamental rewiring of human ecology. So where do we find this evidence? Where do we find this archaeological evidence of this happening? One of my most favorite places when I watch a lot of, or I have watched a lot of history documentaries and different shows and ancient aliens and different things like that, is Göbekli Tepe. And that was about 9600 BCE. We see monumental stone circles predating farming, raising questions about whether communal rituals came before agriculture. And the other place that we look at is the Tell Abu, and I'm going to butcher this one, Harara. And that was between 12,000 and 9,000 BCE. And this was the earliest clear transition from foraging to growing crops in the same settlement. So farming brought about stable food sources, but in the beginning there was a cost to that. And so when we look at the skeletal remains, people were shorter in stature. They developed dental diseases. Anemia was a big problem, and there were nutritional deficiencies. And so the human bodies actually got worse before society got better. And I think that's kind of important. So farming's true innovation wasn't food, it was surplus. Okay, and because of surplus, that is going to drastically change the world into what we have today. So once food could be grown predictably, and I would almost say controlled to a point, it could then be stored. And where there is food stored, that's where power emerges. And some people began to manage harvests. Others began to claim fields. Right? So now we've got the idea of property. Still others began to build walls around settlements. And this is where we see the first corporate systems. Just in the general idea that we have a centralized leader or leadership. Rationing becomes available. There is an allocation of labor. We're going to tell people where to work and how to work and for how long and what they're going to do. And with all of that, of course, there becomes a social hierarchy where some people are more important than others. Okay? And we get evidence from ancient Mesopotamia between 6,000 and 4,000 BCE that shows the emergence of a couple different things. Mesopotamia showed that they had grain storage facilities, that they kept records, and there was differentiated living spaces among the hierarchy, among the people. And this wasn't small. It wasn't a small egalitarian band anymore. This was what they called organized society. And in Sumerian cities like Uruk, by 3500 BC or BCE, we get things like an irrigation system, and we get the cuneiform writing system. We get taxation, we get temples and elites, right? And so humans were no longer living with the land. They were managing it, they were storing it, they were controlling it. And this is how agriculture became the first corporate system. And we're not talking corporations like Apple or Bayer or Microsoft, right? But corporations in function. There was a function, a general function to these corporations. In that there was a centralization of surplus. There was a division of labor, control over certain resources, and hierarchy over other individuals. Okay? And so what was the cost of having settlements? Well, farming supported larger populations, and that's why it spread. But larger populations would always bring about larger problems. Now we have to worry about disease transmissions from things like crowded settlements, social stratifications. Right now we have this social hierarchy. Certain people are treated different than others. We have welfare over land. We see the emergence of child labor in fields, long hours of backbreaking work, right? The field's got to get broken up. It's got to get ready to plant. We have to plant it. We have to take care of it. We have to harvest it. And then when it comes season, the right time of season again, the whole thing comes again and again and again. And women's roles shifted and consolidated around reproductive labor. And compare this to nomadic life, where we have healthier skeletons, lower incidence of chronic disease, and more equitable social organization. Farming did not make humans healthier, at least not initially. The only thing that it really done is it made societies bigger. Right? So now we have a bigger population. We have more humans on the planet. And once food surpluses existed, of course other systems are going to form, right? Well, now we've got a system of property. We have a system of power. We have a system that is ran by and controlled by elites. We have systems of laws that are put into place. So one group controlled grain storage, another controlled labor, another controlled defense, and agriculture was no longer just cultivation, it was social engineering. And farming didn't just feed bodies, it structured lives. And so why this historical shift still matters today? And so today we still debate industrial agriculture, corporate. We still have corporate control of seeds. I mean, look at the seed companies, and that is another whole rabbit hole that you can go down to. A lot of farmers, they can only plant certain types of seeds. Where do they get those seeds from? That's all controlled. What type of seed is it? That's all controlled. When can they plant it? That's all controlled, right? Corporations control farmers by telling them what variation or what hybrid of corn or soybean or wheat that they can plant, and that's all that they can plant. Okay? We have this idea of climate change. We have this idea of sustainability, farming subsidies, global supply chains. All of these trace back to the moment humans stopped roaming and started storing. When we ceased to follow life and began to manage it. And Western economies today are almost entirely agricultural or post-agricultural systems. That's us. right? In the United States, we are a Western economy. A lot of our economy is based solely off agriculture and how we're going about this. Even our cities and technology originate from surplus grain and sedentary defense. And so the first corporate system wasn't a boardroom, it was a granary. And once surplus existed, once property was claimable, once labor was allocated, we had a template for every modern hierarchy that followed. And that was the whole reason for a writing system to be developed in the beginning, was so that the chief or the leader or the elite or whoever the hierarchy individual was at the top, that they could put individuals in certain jobs in certain places to make sure that the grain tax was collected. And so back in the day when civilizations went to these farming subsidiaries, these farming cities, if you were a farmer, you paid a tax not in a monetary value, but you paid a tax in a grain, whatever you were harvesting. You had to donate or contribute so much tax to the population, right? And so that was the idea of where taxation came into play, right? And so the question isn't simply which was better for humanity, right? Nomadic life was healthier, we were egalitarian, we were very adaptive. But if we look at agriculture was let us expand. We became more complex. We became more powerful, right? But in that expansion, in that drive for power, it brought about other costs like disease and inequality and war and hierarchy. And farming didn't make life easier, it made life larger, right? More populous, more mouths to feed. We became more organized, we became more controlled or more controllable, okay? And so the first corporate system was not a corporation at all. It was the structuring of society around the idea of surplus. And especially in the United States, almost everything that we base our day off of is surplus, right? How much food do you have in the fridge? That's your surplus. How much food do you have in the freezer? That's your surplus. How much gas do you have in the car? How many cars do you have? How many rooms in your house do you have? How many rooms are full of stuff? How many houses do you have? How much land do you have? Right? It's all a surplus. And so many Americans, we have this idea, and there's other cultures, there's other civilizations that are like this as well, but we exude in this surplus mentality in America, in that we're never happy with what we have. We always have to have more. We always want the next big thing, the next thing that will make life bigger and better and grander and easier, right? Don't we? Don't we? I think we do. So maybe that's a big issue for Americans. Maybe that is something that is inert within our civilization, within our culture, that if we would just stop and ask ourselves, when is enough enough? Do you really need 3 freezers full of food? Do you really need 2 refrigerators, one for in the house and one for in the garage? Do you really need 6 cars? Do you really need 3 houses, which you only live in one? Right? It really comes down to a fundamental question of when is enough enough, especially for us. right? But not only for us, but for the world, for all of humanity, right? We have to ask ourselves, when is enough enough, and when can we just be happy with what we have, right? And I think for a lot of us, the answer, unfortunately, is never. An individual can become happy. They can become sustainable in what they have and not want for anything more. But I think as a population, as a populace, humans in general, at our basic core, I think we're very greedy. And like I said, I think we always want the next thing, right? What's the next big thing? We got to have it, right? And so the idea that once humans stopped following life, stopped living life, stopped loving life, what happened? Well, they began to govern it. And once you govern life, you yourself become governed by that idea. And that governance, that system, is still with us today. We still fight over who controls the land. We're still doing it today, right? I'm a conservative. I voted for Trump. But do we really need Greenland? I don't know. Some say it's for security. Some say it's for envy. Who knows? Both sides of the aisle, right? That is left up to you to decide. I just want to give you the information. But we still fight over who controls the land, and we want more of it. We fight over who controls the food, and we want more of it. And we fight over who controls the surplus. And of course, we want to control the surplus of everything, because in that hierarchy, it makes us extremely important. We become like the most important person on the hierarchy panel. But when we look back, nomads, when we were nomads, we didn't build empires. Who did? And that was the farmer. And I'm not saying farmers are bad. I love farmers. We would not have a society if it wasn't for farmers. Farmers are the backbone of every culture. But in that shift, in that change from being nomadic to being a farmer, we inadvertently built empires. And building that empire came at a very, very costly price. Right? It did. And so this is breaking the system, where we don't just explain how things happened. We ask why they mattered and what they cost us. Right? So, what do your decisions cost you? That's an important question. Every day. Every day you make a decision. What does that cost you? Right? You really have to look internally, internalize that question. By making this decision, what is it costing me today? And can I live with the repercussions of that decision tomorrow? Right? And with that, thanks for listening. You guys have a good night.